Good morning. I'm Judy Terzotis, President and Publisher of the Times-Picayune, the Advocate, and the Acadiana Advocate. And welcome to our 2023 Economic Outlook series. Everywhere you go, it seems people are talking about the economy and how it's impacting their daily lives. Today's panel will cover those topics that are front of mind for all of us as we look forward to the new year. Thank you for watching.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Renee Sanchez. I'm the editor of the Times-Picayune and the Advocate, and I'd like to welcome everyone to today's discussion. Those in attendance, those watching, we're very grateful that you are taking part in this event as we discuss the economic outlook of Greater New Orleans. We are especially grateful for the distinguished panel we have here of local thought leaders on business, on the economy. Today's discussion will be led by two of our veteran staffers, Jerry DiColo, our Metro editor, and Stephanie Riegel, our business reporter. So with that, I will let them get started. Thanks again.
Thanks, Renee. My name is Jerry DiColo, and I'm the Metro editor at the Times-Picayune, and I am very pleased to be leading this panel discussion today with my colleague, Stephanie Riegel, our business reporter. Before we begin, I would first like to make sure we thank our sponsors for which, if we didn't have them, we would not be able to bring this to you. So I want to thank LCMC Health, Entergy, and Hancock Whitney Bank, and we are going to very briefly run a few short videos from them.
This is what we work for. The moments you live for. The joy. The heart. The wonder. At Entergy, we're dedicated to powering each moment. Today and for future generations. So we're leading the way with a cleaner, more reliable power grid to power every day. Because these moments matter. We power life. Entergy.
Today's the day to take a walk or make a masterpiece with chalk. Throw a line. Join a crew. Learn to make a dark, dark brew. Downward dog in Jackson Square. Whatever you're into, it's out there. At LCMC Health, we're keeping you well so you can keep getting the most out of life.
Dreams keep us growing. Dreams keep us caring. Dreams keep us thriving. Dreams keep us believing in the power of teamwork. Hancock Whitney, your dream, our mission.
This is such an important time to be having this discussion. We are emerging from the depths of the pandemic. Businesses are facing a changed environment. Vast sums of money have been laid out by the federal government for pandemic relief and now infrastructure spending. We are seeing, I think faster than most people probably would have expected, a rebound in our all-important tourism and hospitality sectors. But at the same time, New Orleans and Louisiana are back to losing population. Nationally, inflation is sapping paychecks, markets are down, mortgage rates are up, and there's widespread talk of a coming recession. In New Orleans, in the city proper, 265 people were murdered last year. Carjackings are up, property crimes have also soared. Our infrastructure was tested again in 2021 with Hurricane Ida. And quality of life surveys have showed that dissatisfaction with political leaders in the city overall is at levels that have not been witnessed in years. At the same time, our port is about to embark on one of its biggest expansions in its history. And another port nearby seems to be getting in that game as well. Nearly 50 acres of barren downtown fields are set to turn into a new neighborhood. We have startups in biotech, construction, and other areas that are making $100 million, billion-dollar exits and are growing jobs. And it looks like we may have full parade routes next month, which will probably help that quality of life survey a little bit. So there are opportunities and challenges, and hopefully we'll get to talk about these issues and others over the next hour or so with our panelists. And so I'd like to introduce them now. Brandy Christian, who is the CEO of the Port of New Orleans. Alden McDonald, who is the founder and recently past president of Liberty Bank. Joanne Kunkel, who's the Chief Financial Officer of LCMC Health. Dr. Rochelle Ford, the newly appointed president of Dillard University. And Deanna Rodriguez, CEO of Entergy New Orleans. And Michael Sawaya, who is the president and general manager of the Ernest N. Morial Convention Center. So thank you all for joining us today. And now I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie to begin our question and answer period.
Thank you, Jerry. And I think we have the whole gamut covered with all of y'all representing different perspectives. Alden, I'd like to start with you because as a bank executive, I think what you see sort of touches on all these different industry sectors. What are you hearing from your customers and your borrowers about the price, about the pressure points they're experiencing? What are their biggest concerns? Is it inflation? Is it workforce shortages? Is it all of the above? And how does that sort of shape your perspective as you look out into 2023 and what lies ahead?
Well, that's a big question to ask. But being in the business over 57 years, I've experienced a lot of ups and downs in the economy. I like to look at the glass half full versus half empty. And so each time I've seen a change in the economy, whether it's good, bad, there's always obstacles that people will identify. But what we do, we look at the O for obstacle as O for opportunity, because in every cycle, there are plenty of opportunities that will come out of the pain, because if there's pain, there's gain. That's the way I like to refer to it. So as we listen to customers, as we listen to the community about all of the challenges we have, and so when I look at those challenges, I also look at opportunity for the city. For example, we've lost population over the years, but we've lost population over the last 40 years. At one point, we were close to 600,000 people, down to about 400, close to 400 now. So the community will adjust, and the community will adjust, and normally it adjusts on the positive side. Crime, we have crime all over the country. Every place I travel, I'm listening to the news and I say, well, New Orleans is not as bad. So looking at the glass half full, you begin to see some of the things that we need to do. There's solutions for all of these challenges that we face. The biggest problem for business, for the most part, is staffing. Everybody that I talk to around the country, right, we have staffing problems. So what we saw during the pandemic, we saw a lot of individuals who really took a different look at life. So they wanted some changes. Business went to work from home, which could have been a problem, and part of the problem because people got comfortable in working from home, a different workspace, et cetera. So they had a lot of time to think about things. And what we see a lot of people making different life changes. So the life change cycle is going to cause staffing issues for a period of time, but we'll come out of that like we do everything else. The inflation, we've seen that before. If you go back and take a look at the year you were born, you probably paid, 15 cents for a carton of eggs, and today at about $3.50, $4. So all of those things have changed. And if you take a look at the community and you take a look at staffing, et cetera, the good side of some of this is that we've really been able to raise the minimum wage, not just from a political point of view, but because of cost of living, people began doing different things. So there's a whole different lifestyle that's going to emerge with these changes. that business must look for the change, and business must deal with the change. For example, in the housing piece, houses, people cannot afford a house now. So new products are going to have to come about,
Well,
and
we
new
have-
policy changes.
And we have good questions about affordable housing that we'll ask you in a minute. But I want to shift to Michael, if you don't mind. And we're talking about staffing challenges and minimum wage. And how is that impacting what you're seeing in hospitality? How did we finish out 2022 with these pressure points, with employee shortages and whatnot? And what should restaurants and hotels and the hospitality industry expect to see in 2023?
Sure. Well, we were somewhat pleasantly surprised that tourism recovered as quickly as it did in 2022. In fact, my staff tells me that we were busier than we'd been before Katrina because we had so many big events that were back to back to back. The Final Four, things like that, that affected the entire city. The thing about New Orleans is that people always want to come here, and from a customer's perspective, they want to go to cities that they know they'll get the best attendance. And we're known for fun, we're known for culture, we're known for great food, and people came in droves. One thing that we learned from the pandemic as an industry was that people have to commune, they have to get together. There's only so much you can do through technology, on the phone, through Zoom, or whatever the platforms are. And as we also travel and go to events, we see that as well. I think from a perspective of staffing challenges within restaurants, hotels, and things of that nature, we've all adjusted because we've had to. I mean, we've had to adjust our expectations on what service delivery looks like. We tend to, in hospitality, be a little bit more forgiving and understanding of those things because we're all in it together. But from the perspective of people traveling and adjusting those expectations, they're just glad to get back together. And we're more fortunate in New Orleans than most places. At the convention center, for example, we had no layoffs at all. We kept our staff together. We have almost 400 people. We kept them busy. We trained them during the pandemic. We had plenty of things for them to do. So our service levels did not suffer, and that is going to result in future benefits for us in new bookings and retaining our customers as well.
Thank you. Joanne, if we turn to healthcare, and as we come out of this pandemic, I think LCMC certainly and Ochsner, the other major health system in the market, emerged in many ways stronger, since the pandemic. What do you see now as the major trends and issues on the horizon for 2023 or whatever this next phase of pandemic recovery looks like?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Healthcare is important for all the communities to have a premier healthcare to keeping the people in the communities and attracting them and recruiting them. And I think while we are still seeing, things are changing in healthcare, the volumes are still different, really we were seeing trends toward outpatient, and I think we're going to continue to see that. And that brings different levels of competition. And just like with the healthcare, or with the other industries, healthcare is struggling with staffing. And so we really see really building programs and working with the universities. And we're just investing in 7 programs with 6 of our local higher education institutions, really, and we call it education to employment, where it's really attracting the students as soon as we can into healthcare, showing them healthcare is not just being a nurse or a doctor. It's a whole gamut of all kinds of professions, and really attracting them into the laboratory and the business office and all the things that we need to run that. And I think that's really important for a community and its growth to have that, and to have the 2 systems and have really good healthcare is important.
Thank you. Brandy, let's turn to the port for a minute. And before we talk about your new billion-dollar deal, tell us, as we continue on the sort of pandemic thread here, are we over supply chain disruptions? What is the health of the industry like, and how is that impacting your outlook, through the lens of the port?
Certainly. Obviously, trade is very fluid and volatile. Commerce is very sensitive to political factors, economic factors, wars, you name it. So that does ebb and flow. From a congestion standpoint, we're starting to see that congestion level out, as well as the shipping rates. Container rates got extremely high. And really what drove that congestion was floods of imports coming into the United States. Because if you look at COVID, e-commerce got a bunch of new customers. And we don't see that going away. That is going to be a trend. You will continue to see that way of shopping. They've just begun to tap that market. So that will continue. I think what it's done is caused retailers and suppliers to diversify their supply chain. And if you will, not put all their eggs in one basket. Go through one port, one railroad, one gateway. And so any industry gateway that can serve to bring in those imports, I think will succeed.
So are you seeing different customers for the shipping that comes through New Orleans and then goes out into the world, and then vice versa? So is there anything in particular you're seeing, if more from Europe, more from Asia, going more to particular places?
Yeah, I would say it's spread out. You have, in some instances, you're seeing a little bit more of nearshoring through Central America, Mexico, where you're getting your parts to do the manufacturing process coming from Central America. So we've seen a lot of growth, obviously, with our proximity. Where most of the imports have been coming in is from Asia, because that is where the manufacturing resides today. What we're seeing is that major shippers that may have been using the West Coast, they have all their trucking companies, their warehousing, their distribution centers, that they're realizing, whether it's because of congestion, if it's the labor negotiations with the longshoremen on the West Coast, or natural disasters that can completely shut down your supply chain, that they need to invest in distribution centers and supply chains across the country. Even prior to this congestion, the Gulf, by percentage, was growing the fastest in the container trade, because retailers were realizing, instead of just having one warehouse, just-in-time delivery, we need to spread our inventory. And so we're seeing new shippers look at the Gulf as a real alternative, because when you look at those imports, yes, a lot goes to the West Coast and the East Coast. The majority is feeding into the middle of this country, and New Orleans has the best connectivity.
Good to know. Dr. Ford, if we talk about higher education for a minute, like all sectors, y'all had to make a lot of adjustments during the pandemic. Tell us what the 2022-23 school year looked like and how you balanced those concerns for student safety with trying to give them the best possible experience, and how you think that will shape moving forward,
So the good news is that New Orleans is still an attractive place for university students. Really, New Orleans is a hub. It's one of the major industries of our city are the colleges and universities here. You actually have 2 of the top 20 historically black colleges and universities here in the city. Of course, Dillard University, the oldest in the state, and then also Xavier University. And I think that particularly when you look at the black colleges here in the and also SUNO, Southern University of New Orleans, we are attracting students because after 2020, students want, particularly black identifying students, want a place of belonging. And they are looking to historically black colleges because they can receive an inclusive environment where they're not worried about having to explain their identities to other people, and they can really learn about their past, deal with the issues of the day, and create solutions for tomorrow. And so we saw an increased interest in studying here. Great weather, great food, great entertainment, but also an opportunity to engage with the other campuses and to engage with the communities here. So students are attracted to schools where you can work with and partner and intern at places like Entergy and places like LCMC and with our banking institutions. And that is unique. And in fact, one of the ways that we are able to help unify that university community was through GNO Inc. and actually doing a full-blown marketing campaign to say, study New Orleans, and to come and experience that. So our relationships with the healthcare helped us to get through COVID. We continue to help our students to get immunizations. Dillard actually required that everyone have the booster. And it worked, and students have come back. and they feel safer. Our employee base feels safer because, particularly with a base of employees like Dillard has, predominantly African American, and so higher on some of the health disparities issues, knowing that we were going to keep each other safer by masking at the beginning of the semesters because we knew there's going to be so much traffic. Having that booster enabled us to operate in a safe environment, but also capitalizing off of all the lessons we learned from COVID with distance education and how we can use those programs, elevate them, can only make our university stronger.
Thank you. And that brings up something I'd like to ask Deanna when we talk about people feeling safe. And Entergy is a major downtown employer. Are people back in the office? Do you think the balance and mix that you have of that is the way it's going to stay long term? And what are you seeing downtown with employees back in the office in general?
Well, I would divide our employees up into two roles, right? We have the folks that never stayed home because they had to be out there every day. And so we have this thing where we thank a lineman because we wouldn't have the power at your house, at our businesses, but for the folks that showed up every day during COVID. So they did not have the option to stay home. We also have 2 care centers, payment centers, where customers would either, with limited means or want to pay in cash, would go pay their bills in cash. Our customer care centers were open every single day. And then we have the folks that work at corporate. Entergy overall employs about 2,000 people in the New Orleans metro area. And as a reminder to our policymakers, our city leaders, my fellow panelists, we're the only Fortune 500 company headquartered in the entire state of Louisiana. So we might remember that when we're thinking about drawing other business. It's important to remember that fact. The hybrid piece is the same challenge I'm sure everybody has here, which is, a lot of folks have gotten used to working from home and they're, athleisure wear. Which is a whole other story when they come back to work that way. But you have to think through how that works, what employees are expecting. Expectations are very different. Alden referred to that. They have decided what I can do. Much like healthcare, you have nurses and doctors that have to show up. We don't have that luxury. I think what we're doing, at least in the downtown, is accommodating. Sometimes they have hybrid work schedules. Safety is an issue because we're right near the Superdome and right near the everything downtown where there has been an uptick in crime. But it's also the advantage of bringing people downtown, and people love the city. So we have a lot of people who won't go anywhere because they're committed and from here.
Yeah. I'm curious because several of you have talked about staffing problems, staffing challenges, developing workforce, changes workforce. Joanne, maybe this question is for you. What about pay? I mean, is everything coming up, particularly for doctors and nurses and professionals, but maybe across the board at LCMC? I mean, that is one way that you can get employees to respond, and so what's happening there at LCMC? And I'm curious, anyone else too?
Yeah, absolutely. Even some of the rating agencies have come out, and I know they're expecting healthcare wages to go up another 6 to 10%, even in the next year. And so every day we are looking at wages and making sure our people are willing to stay with us, because the cost of turnover can far exceed what it would look at to make sure you maintain market increases. And physicians, are very important. So making sure that all of our physicians too feel like they are having competitive positions. I think we may be a little bit behind that. We're still heavy reliance on contract labor. And
Does that mean like travel nurses?
Traveling nurses, but not just nurses, also lab techs, radiology techs, locums when it comes to even physicians, if you have open positions and you're paying, 2 to 3 times what it would cost to have an employee. So focusing on working with our higher education and getting those people as employees and attracting them and keeping them is very important.
Mm-hmm. Michael, I'll ask the same question to you. You know, how is that changing with your workforce? Are you seeing cost of living increases? Are you trying to, is pay attracting more staff? Are there other benefits that you're starting to look towards?
Sure. Well, we position ourselves to be a hospitality employer of choice, and those aren't just words. I mean, we just added the first chief diversity officer at a convention center in the country. We believe that our workforce and our environment is key and critical. Last year, for example, with relation to pay, we had to do a market adjustment in the first quarter. That was what we considered a cost of living adjustment. But we also, every other year, do a market adjustment study. And within that year, we also gave a market adjustment study. So we recognize that if we don't stay current with that and stay ahead of the game, that we're not going to meet our goal of being that employer of choice. So our work environment and retention is key and critical. We can't put on a convention for 10 or 20,000 people if we don't have the staff to do it right.
I want to, and maybe you can pick it up first, Michael, or some of the others can jump in because it affects all of you, and it's the discussions and the concerns and the crisis that we're having in the city on crime. And maybe, Alden, it's bad everywhere, but we know it's bad here. And there was a 6.5-hour meeting yesterday at the City Council, which you may have read about in our newspaper. What kind of conversations are you having, for instance, with the conventions that want to come here? What are you telling them? What kind of assurances can you give people? And then what kind of conversations are some of y'all having with the business and political leadership in this city?
You know, we attended a convention last week, myself and Walt Leger from New Orleans and Company. We had to meet with a client who had concerns about what they were seeing in national media and with some of the feedback they got from their attendees. And it would be different if we weren't being proactive to address our issues, if we weren't recognizing that safety is a high priority. And I think we effectively were able to convince her that we're on top of it. We're very involved in those discussions. We know that there's crime everywhere. The majority of the areas that our convention attendees and our tourists interact in are not the areas where the most crime is in the city. But we recognize it as being a major issue. And with data in our pocket to address that with our clients' concerns, we're able to overcome some of those objections. I can't say that we're going to get to everyone, but we're certainly going to send out the message that we're taking a proactive approach to it.
One of the ways in which the university, Dillard in particular, is partnering to be a solution is that we actually have a Center for Racial Justice. And we are convening conversations, interfaith community joined together at Dillard to have a discussion on what they can do as a collective across different religions to address this issue. The university is giving alternatives to youth so that they can be engaged in summer programs that will get them learning versus having idle times on their hands. So working with middle schoolers and STEM programs and with high school students and pre-college programs. But we're also working with the sheriff and the police department to offer evening, online, and weekend courses in criminal justice so that that can be another added benefit for their officers to join the force. And so we know that there's challenges, in getting people hired, but we want that to be an additional incentive to let people know that there are alternatives in working with us. And another thing is in terms of trying to bring people together, yesterday we just announced, 2 days ago, we just announced the reinstituting of our National Center for Black and Jewish Relations. And there was a powerful movement of bringing the Jewish community and the Black community together to fight for civil rights in the 60s, but we need to bring those two communities together so that we can help reduce the anger that might be existing in our communities, joining forces to create additional peace. And so I think the university's ability to bring people together, to provide educational opportunities for law enforcement, but also providing additional opportunities for the youth in our city is part of the solution.
One thing that I think you, and I'll turn this to a different topic, one thing that, economists will often say is that business leaders are not great about predicting a recession, but they're good at predicting what's happening in their businesses and where things are happening for them or their industry. So I'll ask this I'd like to hear what Deanna says and Alden says, and if anyone else wants to jump in. If you look through the next 6 months to a year, Deanna, in terms of the manufacturers and the large industrial companies that you serve, in terms of the residential customers that you serve, what, if you put your finger on the scale, are you anticipating continued growth? Do you feel like they're starting to back off a little bit? I mean, because these are things, of course, you all have to plan for. What does that look like?
The way our industry works, Entergy New Orleans is different. We're about 98% residential. Entergy Louisiana, which is most of the state, has the large industrial customers. They're seeing a shift. And so much like Brandy mentioned, it's an overall shift of what the expectations are. So there's been opportunities that are now available to these large industrial customers that are seeing growth. So and we're planning for that. I think the other transition that our industry in particular is making has to do with resiliency and the storms that come to this area and what we're having to do in hardening the grid. We have filed a $1.5 billion plan and that's just for New Orleans, to upgrade our grid, and that certainly speaks to jobs and the economy and spending money in this city. So there's kind of the give and take of what we're expecting. Now, overall, our rates, just for, again, everybody can say the price of eggs, right? And we sit there, but nobody's going to go and, I guess you can, and sit in front of a egg farm and protest, but we're a little bit easier to get to. But again, when we were talking about California and the shift of the just-in-time markets, things like that, our commercial rates are 9% lower than the national average. Our residential rates are about the same. And that's one thing to say, okay, well, New Orleans is, lower economic too, but California's average rates, Brandy, are 33% higher than the national average. So that's what you're able to say, the difference between the Port of New Orleans and Long Beach, I guess. And New York State was 49.1% higher than the national average. So we're not comparing
These are commercial power rates? Or?
Right, that's right. And so I'm not comparing them to us, I'm comparing to the national average. Ours is almost 10% lower. Everyone else, and many are mostly higher. So all of that has to be, as we look towards our economic opportunities, I think it's the electrification of the port, perhaps. It's EV cars. Everyone is starting to think through, what does that mean to me? As we try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that's another opportunity there. So I'd look at our resiliency plan, what we're trying to invest in the city. I'd look at the electrification overall of our country and our city, and I'd look at EVs as an opportunity for us in our industry.
Alden, yeah, I'll ask, and maybe some of the, the data points I think, the bankers or the people are looking at to banks is always, are we starting to see more delinquencies? Are we starting to see people later on their mortgages? Is credit card debt going up? I'm just curious what y'all are seeing at Liberty.
I'd like to, first of all, I'm going to go on record. There will not be a recession.
Okay. Write it down, everybody.
And possibility of a slight one, but we are looking at no recession. We see the economy changing and getting in place to adjust for all of the other changes. We don't see many delinquencies at this point. However, New Orleans will lag maybe about a year behind the different economies, right?
And why is that?
Well, you have different types of businesses. And in other parts of the country, you have more larger businesses. We have smaller businesses down here. And in Louisiana, the different businesses will react to things that happen in the other part of the economy. So it lags about a year. We do predict a little increase in mortgages. The pressure of the insurance industry primarily is causing escrows to go up, both for residential customers as well as commercial customers. And we're going to have to find a solution for that. State of Louisiana must find a solution for the insurance industry. So we're going to see a few delinquencies in that area. The small businesses that we see are doing pretty well with the adjustments that's been made in the economy. People are charging more, people are making more. So a new balance is taking place within the business community. For example, we had our best year ever. We've grown to $1 billion of assets, largest African-American bank in the country. So we've seen a lot of good growth. We've seen a lot of good things. And of course, we have to plan for the different changes in the economy that we have to do. And we're looking at the future. We're diversifying. We made an announcement last month. We opened another national company that's based in South Carolina for commercial insurance. We have a pretty good staff that we think will help offset some of the business challenges for business insurance. Also looking at some possibilities of helping the state of Louisiana come up with a solution for the insurance crisis. So a lot of good things are happening. I know I mentioned I look at the glass half full, but I've always practiced whenever there's an obstacle, look for opportunity, because you have opportunities coming behind every obstacle you meet.
Brandy, if I could shift to the port for a minute, because one of the bright spots, glass half full, was the announcement y'all made last month about a major investor partner in the Louisiana International Terminal. What will the investment mean, and sort of what is the timeline for this new port, and how will it interact with the other port facilities and the other port systems in the state?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it was a huge announcement for us, for the state, with the governor announcing the partnership. What was significant about it, it was obviously their financial contribution to make the project a reality. I think also the fact that they are the individuals that bring the cargo. One of the partners is the largest container ocean carrier in the world and is the largest user of the Mississippi River. So that gives us a lot of confidence that it'll be a success and that there's a demand for that. Currently, we're in the permitting process that typically is about a 3-year process. So we envision, if it's successful in the permitting process, that we'd begin construction in 2025. With getting a first berth open by 2028. So that obviously is extremely important to us, because in container shipping, if you think about it, these vessels are coming from Asia 30 days. They don't just come to one port. They go to Houston, Mobile, and New Orleans. So we have to be ready to be able to take that next size of vessel. Houston is a very big market. They kind of dictate the size of vessel. The Crescent Connection Bridge basically limits us to the next size of vessel cannot get under that bridge. So right now, that timeline really works for what we're seeing in the market. In terms of the current facilities, the beauty of being in the container business, we're the only port in the state in the container business. Because we have the facility at Napoleon, we can kind of transition and continue to service the market, grow the market as we develop this new terminal.
Can I ask a question on that? Does that mean long-term the container terminal, the uptown container terminals go away and that everything containerized shifts to Violet?
No, really what we've been working on, it really started with the acquisition of the New Orleans Public Belt, is not looking at things as one terminal, but really building a port complex that is all integrated and connected. The Napoleon Container Terminal will continue to exist for kind of the smaller vessels, niche containers, but also we have to remember that all of our break bulk facilities are there, so non-containerized. Folgers Coffee and Processing is there. New Orleans cold storage. So it'll open up a little bit of space for us to be able to go over after some kind of smaller niche container businesses, but also more non-containerized heavy lift projects. A good example is right now in that area, we're bringing in all of the major construction components for the Venture Global LNG project in Plaquemines. We envision having the space to be able to do more of that. So the two terminals will work together, and really the beauty of the partnership is that the partners, Till and MSC, they are the operators at the Napoleon Container Terminal. So it'll be an integrated strategy. What we did not want was just to cannibalize one terminal and take business from one, move the jobs, move the containers to the other, but instead grow the entire pie for everyone. And a good example of that is we also partner with the Port of St. Bernard and with the Port of Baton Rouge in the container business. So they've developed facilities like in Baton Rouge, we have a container on barge terminal that the Port of Baton Rouge operates in conjunction with us. So we really see this being a system of container terminals.
There's so many good follow-ups, but I want to touch on a bunch of different things. And Michael, y'all have another big project down your way by the convention center, and that's the River District project. Can you give us an update on that? And when do we expect to see shovels in the ground? What will the first things people see going up?
Sure. They're in the process now of the area itself has to go through an environmental study and then remediation to that area. So that's all in the works. There are things that need to be done with the city for permitting, and they're in the process of that. A traffic study and how that affects the whole area has to be approved by the city. So all that's moving. Some along the way, there'll be some announcements about some of the things that are planned there. But all said and done, we're expecting that the end of this year or next year, you'll start seeing some building things go on in the area as well. But in the area around us, our own building is going to go through a transformation. We've done so much to the building already, but we have to do a 40-acre roof this year. That'll get started in this first quarter. And that's major because we have to work around the event load. But that'll be one of our biggest projects for the year. And then going into that, at the end of the year, we'll be redoing all of our meeting rooms. We have 140 meeting rooms. They just need a refresh, but something that we have to, again, work around the event load for. But a lot of things that are going on both in the building and on the development area as well. So once we get through the processes that it takes to do that, we'll start seeing mostly the residential part of that area come out of the ground.
So the residential is sort of first, you think, is probably what goes in the ground first? Residential, you said?
Residential is one of the first projects, includes 400 affordable housing units that the developer has committed to, one of the largest projects in the state.
Mm-hmm. Let's stick with all the projects and deals. I think we hit all of them except Tulane and LCMC. So Joanne, that was approved by the Secretary of State last month. So where are we in the integration? What does it look like? I know a lot of this is based on working with the medical school and bringing residents into some of these other things. What's the timeline on there? When would someone that's walking into one of the medical complex, East Jefferson, start to see changes in the building, in the lobby, and the services?
Absolutely, a very exciting partnership that we were able to close that deal on the 1st of January. So we're almost 3 weeks into working with our new partners. It's been going very, very well. You know, healthcare itself, if you think back, is kind of thought to maybe be recession-proof, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the extended period of change and moving from, seeing lower volumes, and no one can avoid the high cost of supplies and supply chain issues and the wage pressure. And we really believe that partnering and coming together and really focusing on our academic health system vision is really going to help propel us to being able to slow that cost of care. We have been working, and we're working with all of the provider partners on all the service lines to build those out. We expect to start seeing some of those relocations and be done within the next 12 to 18 months. So as we start to finalize some of these plans in the next, probably by early summer, we'll start to be able to share a lot of those plans with you all. even today, just working together and looking at staffing and what things we can do together, I think is already making a difference. We really focus on making sure that we can provide, top-level care, that the professionals are working at the top of their license. So how do we provide and things like that? But we're very excited, and it's really going well. We're excited to share that with you as soon as we can.
Cool. Well, I'll mention one other deal, and this is not for anyone that's on this panel, but of course, we had a story today that talked about the Port of South Louisiana and their purchase of, proposed acquisition at this point, of the Avondale shipyards. So one of the things that came up in that both was that John Bell Edwards has not decided to support the project. He's been a proponent of redevelopment at that port for a long time, but isn't supporting, has a lot of questions answered. And one thing that I thought was interesting is that a number of civic leaders, a number of people connected to the port, when they were discussing Avondale, have said, this is an example of our ports not working together enough to have a combined strategy. I'm very curious, Brandy, what you think about that idea, which I think has been talked about for decades, right? About why doesn't the Port of Baton Rouge, all the way down to the mouth of the river, work together in some more coordinated way? So I'm just curious your thoughts on that, on the deal, on more coordination, like you said, of not cannibalizing different parts of what is a huge asset for us.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I think we all agree we want to see Avondale be a success, and I think many people have put a lot of energy towards that. In terms of an integrated strategy, I mean, I think just represented at this table, there is tremendous needs for infrastructure dollars. And particularly when you're putting state tax dollars at risk, we really have to be collaborative and partner and let the private sector play to their strengths and let the public sector play to their strengths and have a lot of due diligence towards that. When it comes to collaboration, that's extremely important. I've been in this market 8 years. It's interesting from a strategy perspective. I've often said if I had been able to focus on Georgia and Texas and Alabama more than I've had to focus on competitive issues within the river, we'd probably be much further along. Now, with that said, I think the majority of the ports have come together to work on strategies. Like I mentioned, when you look at the project in St. Bernard, that was done through 3 years of working with the Port of St. Bernard, working with the Port of Baton Rouge to put in the container on barge service, and that's because the state had a focus and a strategy on building our container business and bringing imports into the state. I think there's other areas that maybe that hasn't happened. If anything, hopefully this really brings that conversation to the forefront because dollars are so limited. And we can't be everything to everybody. So at the end of the day, that really is important because the needs are great on the river.
There's something that comes up that,
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add, just in terms of the federal funding and the dollars that are available, and a good example of us working together would be with, at least Entergy New Orleans, is starting to work with Tulane, for example, and the redevelopment of the downtown area, what they're doing and what that will mean to the entire city. And what we have to do is have the infrastructure that Brandy talked about prepared, ready for there to be growth. We happen to rely, with all due respect, on a lot of hospitality industry, but we need jobs that are either through healthcare or through banking, through whatever other means through the port, to be able to have these jobs that at least diversify our economy so that we can help support the growth, and our students that come here could stay here. They would want to stay here. So we are working with the city, with city council, with the mayor's office, with everyone in trying to do partnerships in seeking federal funds. There's a number of opportunities through the Department of Energy for infrastructure dollars, specifically for microgrids, for more renewables, things like that, that we can be a microcosm and a pilot for some of these new technologies that Entergy then can enable for our customers. also doing it in a way, if we can get other supplemental funding, it won't be charged to the customer. So if we can all work together in a way that's productive, and I agree with you, Brandy, if we could figure out how to do that more and align the business part with the public part, permitting should take less time, we should all work together, and then perhaps we can be more successful.
Maybe you sort of answered the question I was going to ask, but you had mentioned something a few minutes ago about how y'all are the only Fortune 500 company in the state. And I remember when I started reporting, there were like 6 or 7, you know, and I've heard a lot of people say in recent months, you know, we've had no new office buildings constructed in downtown New Orleans in those 30 years. But throughout that time, I've always heard people talking about working together. Alden McDonald might remember MetroVision, right, when all the chambers were going to work together. And I'm just not seeing where any of it's really happened, even though we keep saying the same thing over and over again. Specifically, how do we make this happen besides just paying lip service to it or recognizing that it's a problem?
I would like to jump in on this. From a business perspective, I see more businesses in more industries working together. I mean, if you just take a look at this panel, it's a lot of success from just the discussion on this panel. A lot of growth taking place. A lot of good things are taking place. And if we continue to just focus in on the negatives, and maybe the article in the newspaper this morning was one of them, right, on the Avondale piece. But the port has been working together for a long time. I used to be a member of the Port Commission. I used to be a member in the Convention Center, right?
You should list the ones you weren't a member of.
And I continue to see the coordination and the collaboration that takes place every day. I'm on the Business Council, right? So we talk about a lot of issues. There's a lot of coordination that took place for Entergy and the Sewage and Water Board for the backup site. There's a lot going on in renewable energy. All of that is coordination. And all of these things are being coordinated not only on the local level, state level, and national level. So I see a lot of coordination taking place, and I see a lot of progress taking place. And it's because of collaboration. And maybe the business community should do a better job at stating where the collaboration is taking place.
And I think the support for LCMC and Tulane, for everybody across the whole region, was this collaboration between the two healthcare businesses and the university. And I think that was really a big piece of us getting this done.
Dr. Ford, yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I felt optimistic about joining this community. I've only been in the city since July 1, and it has been that collaboration. The mayor literally just pulled together all of the historically black colleges to start working on proposals and things that we can submit to the federal government. The federal government has said their infrastructure dollars must go to communities that have high levels of poverty and serving minority communities. That is New Orleans. They also said you have to partner with historically black colleges and minority serving institutions. That's Dillard. So as a new president, you know, I have been very welcomed by the business community, invited to sit on the board of the Business Council, invited to sit on the board of GNO Inc., had welcome, thank you to Ms. McDonald for your, inviting the business community to meet me personally at your offices. But it's not just that. There are proposals that are on the table. The H to the Future would not have come to our city if it wasn't for collaboration between state, local, university, and that's all of our universities. And so I think that that level of optimism is here. And Dillard, we're starting on a groundbreaking. We're just announced, a partnership for a new residence hall, and we're leaning into the idea of living, learning, serving communities. And so we've had great interest from the business community to help us look into community have said, I partner with you, Dr. Ford. So although you may not see headlines every day, but the fact that Ochsner is working with Xavier to start a new medical school, that's huge partnership. So
It was a big headline, too.
it was a big headline. So I think that there's more good happening in this city and in this state than there actually is negative. Otherwise, you wouldn't be getting students to want to come, faculty and administrators to want to leave their homes and come to this area.
I get a lot of the negative. So to be clear, I get a lot of the negative, and we see a lot when we are the only Fortune 500 company. And so we're kind of the 800-pound gorilla that is really easy to run against. So instead of running against, and this is, I'm probably saying things I shouldn't, but, well, I already started. But it's easier for a politician to run against Entergy than it is to run against another candidate. So we see a lot. So when you see an anti-business sentiment out there, because it's just easy, I think it scares other corporate headquarters from wondering, well, do I move there, and am I going to be have to manage that kind of bad press in politics too? So I think the business community is aligned. I think the nonprofit community is aligned. I think that we give a lot of money to nonprofits. We also work very closely with the universities. I do think that what we say about our business, anti-business, pro-business, we need to be more accommodating, at least, and honest with the businesses that we want to draw here. So.
We probably have time for maybe one more question or maybe one or two more fast ones. So what I'll do is, instead of doing that, I will just ask you all, and we'll go down the list. And if someone takes a lot of time, then the person at the end of the table is not going to get to answer. So know that. Give me one prediction for 2023 in your industry or in the city of New Orleans.
You start on the other end.
Okay.
Michael, go ahead.
All right.
Just tell us a big convention that's coming into town.
Yeah, we're really bullish. You know, we're so strong in the medical community when it comes to conventions. We have the American Academy of Dermatology coming, 23,000 people this year. Cardiology, 17,000 people. This city is really vibrant and different when we have that kind of activity. So while all that's going on, we're going to be renovating our building at the same time. So it'll be challenging yet rewarding at the same time. We started out with Miss Universe pageant. That's not all bad. And we're bringing for the first time the Barrett-Jackson Auto Auction that we actually confirmed yesterday. So really exciting things happening in the tourism realm for this year. So stay tuned.
Deanna?
I'm the glass half full person too. So I predict that we will work more closely and more aligned with our regulator, and we will bring more businesses to the city to help everyone.
So I believe that we're going to continue to have great collaborations with the business and governmental entities. And for Dillard, that means really promoting this idea that we're a communiversity, that we're committed to really living our mission of cultivating leaders. And I think the other part of that is that they're leaders who live ethically, think and communicate precisely, and act courageously to make a world a better place. And I don't say that to say it lightly, but it takes partnership. It takes partnership with engaging the time of individuals to come and to talk and engage with our students, doing partnerships with those who come and visit our city, but also of talent, because we need to hear from the business community to help advise us as we try to promote what we're trying to do in terms of becoming that living, learning, and serving community, but then also of treasure. And we appreciate the investments and the partnership, because an investment in Dillard and investment in our other universities is an investment in the city, so we can bring talent, retain talent, and really grow our city economically and socially.
Joanne?
Yeah, I think that's an easy one. I think you're going to see great things come out with LCMC Health as we invest in our partnership, our new partnership with Tulane, and we start moving toward all of the service lines. And I think you're going to see all the reinvestment that we're going to make downtown and that Tulane is committed to. There's going to be a lot of change.
With a lot of the good things going on from this panel, everybody's going to make money. And you could book that one. But My prediction will be that you will begin to see interest rates not only level off, but to begin a downward trend by the end of the year.
I'd say in terms of the port being a pretty diverse business, I think really on the positive side, we've come back from pre-COVID numbers, and I think you're going to see record-breaking numbers in the cruise business. And I think you're going to see even more collaboration with our partners like Michael with public safety to ensure that those cruise lines keep coming here to New Orleans. So we're very excited about that. I think also with the momentum and the announcement of the partnership around the new terminal, I think you're going to see more and more logistics and distribution companies coming into the region and coming into the state. Just last week, we announced Cuomo Tires going into Franklin, Louisiana, Medline opening up on the North Shore. And that's all because they realize that Louisiana is delivering the infrastructure. So I think those are really positives and brings more diversification to our economy.
I want to thank all of the panelists for joining us today. I want to thank all of our viewers and our readers and our watchers. I want to thank our sponsors again, LCMC Health, Entergy, and Hancock Whitney Bank. And I also want to encourage you to subscribe to your local newspaper. And if your local newspaper is the Times-Picayune, then please subscribe to that. Thank you very much for joining us today, and have a great one.
Thank you.
Good seeing you.